Greetings, it's Monday, February the 3rd, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. We have a lot to talk about this week, and I'm going to start off with something that I know a fair amount about because of where I live and where I've lived and time I've spent there, and that's the terrible tragedy in the Potomac involving the American airline feeder plane, which is what these little bombardiers are called. They're going in and out of DCA all the time, and a helicopter flown by the U.S. Army. Now, if you've read any of my stuff, you've known that I've done stories on airline crashes, and one thing I'm also a big fan of is not saying what you know when you don't know what you're saying. We don't know the whole story behind this. Now, we know some of it, and we actually pretty much know why it happened. But until you have all the details, you don't have all the details. And in spite of all the repulsive DEI stuff that's been going on over the years in the federal government, and may have had something to do with this disaster, we really don't know yet, the people who work for the National Transportation Safety Board are among the most amazing professionals the federal government has at its disposal and indeed has ever produced. And these people are very good at their jobs. So all of this disaster porn, which is what it is, where everybody's trying to call up a pilot on either mainstream media or in some cases alternative media to get their opinion on what might have happened, well, I can tell you what happened and why it happened to an extent, because I've spent a lot of time along the Potomac. I've spent a lot of time at that airport. And if anybody lives in the Beltway area, you see the dance done by airplanes, helicopters, and it's almost like a finely tuned Swiss watch. It's amazing to see. Now, that helicopter was higher than 200 feet. Now, why it was above 200 feet, that's yet to be determined. What was very suspicious was that the identity of the mysterious third person, who turned out to be a female pilot and worked a lot for the Biden administration and was involved in various things that we aren't really being given the full story on. Well, did that have anything to do with the crash? Honestly, folks, we don't know. We don't know. We really don't. We got to be honest about this. Until the details are in, and it takes months to research this sort of thing, we don't really know. Now, Donald Trump made some remarks about DEI at the beginning. He may know more than we do. In fact, he probably does. But honestly, I think there's a better time to bring this stuff up. The real tragedy I found is that figure skating is such a beautiful thing. Yet all these young children, in many cases, who are now gone, that brought nothing but beauty to the world. I mean, who hates figure skating done to classical music and with grace and dignity and style? Well, we don't know what we don't know. Now, the other air disaster up in Philadelphia, well, that's going to be a harder thing to find out. Now, I've seen a lot of disparaging comments about, the plane was based in Mexico, the flight crew was Mexican. Well, so was the passenger. She went to a Shriners Hospital, which usually handles burn victims, and that sort of thing goes on all the time. People from all over the world come to the United States for quality medical care. Okay, it's not a crime to come from Mexico, people. Sorry. We don't know what happened, and you know what? It's probably going to be unlikely that we do, because if you saw that plane go in at that speed with that much violence, I don't think they're going to recover any of the passengers in any form. Really, I mean, they went. That was a bomb going off. And the flight data recorders, the cockpit voice recorder, I'll bet you it didn't survive. I think if it had survived, they would have found it by now. Something bad happened. Did the pilots intentionally fly the plane into the ground? Don't think so. Frankly, it was a pretty close call because that thing was only yards away from a shopping mall. In fact, it hit at the entranceway to a shopping mall. That could have been much worse. Now, one of the things I find very repulsive, besides all the disaster porn going on and all the speculation based on nothing more than speculation, is the blame. Oh, Mark my words, every puppy hit by a car and every kitten that goes missing for the next 4 years is going to be blamed by the legacy media on the presidential administration currently there. Really, it's stupid. Stop it. Start acting like what you're supposed to be. So, yeah, that helicopter in Washington shouldn't have been at that altitude. No excuse. Somebody's responsible for it. It wasn't the people landing the plane, that's for sure. Planes landing at DCA have the right of way. But let's just go back to being adults about this, okay? Let's see how the investigation goes, and then if something that needs to be fixed, let's fix it then. There's too many helicopters going around the D.C. area. They're constantly training. I mean, all the time. You drive home on 395 at times, and I've done that. You'll see a helicopter less than 100 feet above you sometimes. You'll see presidential helicopters flying all over the place. I have a visitor from out of town, and they'll say, "Oh, look, there's the president." I said, no, they're probably just training. They're training. Always training. Shuttling people to and from the Pentagon, which is pretty much next door to the airport. I'm going to say this again, sorry. Do not gargle at the fountain of knowledge. Drink from it or talk to someone who has. You'll be better for it. Now, other stuff going on in the news. Oh, the trade war starting up between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. I wouldn't really call it a trade war. It's going to be sort of like a skirmish. Well, okay, it's kind of what everybody was voting for, including me. Canada, Mexico have been feeding off the U.S. economy for a very long time, and that's got to stop. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to throw the U.S. into a depression in spite of what I've been seeing some people print. It's nonsense. But this is what we're supposed to be doing. It's not going to change overnight. When Mr. Trudeau, who, as you see, has not resigned, he says he will when somebody is there to replace him, he came out, my, what a pathetic person. He came out and says, well, we're going to do a 25% import on American goods, which is where Canada gets an awful lot of its stuff from. Okay, that's going to go well for your people. Fine, Canadians should build and buy Canadian. Mexicans should build and buy Mexican. Nothing's wrong with that. Nothing's wrong with that. But they can't really survive. Trudeau was in panic when he met Trump after he was elected, and he was being told that he's going to get hit with 25% tariffs. You know something, too, is I'm finding this guy more and more repulsive as time goes on. Please replace him, Canada. And the more you look at him and the more you hear him and compare him to, well, the cigar chewer that ruled Cuba for so long, and you look into his mother's reputation, he does look like Fidel Castro's love child, doesn't he? Except, at least Fidel was a bit more of a realist and knew more about economics, I think. That's, this is what we're supposed to do, and Europe has been doing the same thing. China is not really making such a big stink, and I think that's because they're smarter. They'd rather see the U.S. economy strong and vibrant and compete on its own, because then it'll be better for their business. You see, they've poured a lot of money into the United States, and the U.S. is a big market for them. They want to see a market where people have money, where there's a middle class. China's very big on the middle class, because they know that stabilizes a country. Interesting, a communist country, or what's supposed to be a communist country, understands the value of a middle class more than the United States does. And speaking of China and overseas expansion and other such things, well, the Panama Canal, it looks like they're going to play ball a little bit. The Chinese really don't care about the Panama Canal just because some companies were down there doing repair work. Again, China mostly exports with the west coast of the United States, and these wonderful containers are put on American trains and sent all over the country. They don't need the Panama Canal. They might be involved in putting together a duplicate of it. That's a sort of an on and off project, but it's not a big deal. Something like 75% of all the commerce that goes through the Panama Canal is American related. I mean, American ships going to the West Coast and things like that. Yeah, that's why we kind of were supposed to keep it, folks, but yeah. Oh, and Greenland, yes. Make America imperialist again. An interesting story there. Denmark is allocating $1.5 billion to build up the defenses of Greenland, which, well, the U.S. basically controls Greenland already, but I found that a great sign, and maybe Trump is playing what they call fourth dimensional chess. Here it is. Denmark is going to start footing the bill more for securing the shoreline of what's supposed to be their territory. Clever. Of course, it's important for Europe to start footing the bill. I would not be surprised if at the end of 4 years NATO is not replaced by something else. We don't really need NATO in its original form because the Soviet Union is long gone. Other world leaders, Vladimir Putin seems to be happy of what's going on in the United States. Again, the rest of the world wants to see the U.S. healthy and strong. It's better for them. Really. I mean, North Korea might have different ideas, but not exactly as relevant. So, people are kind of thinking, the U.S. is starting to act like a real country again. It's starting to say that there's only two sexes. That's interesting. Two genders. And a lot of other fun things going on. Foreign aid, yes. Otherwise known as tribute back in the old days. Countries that paid tribute to keep people from attacking them usually lost their money and lost their country. We're giving money to no one at this point except for Israel and Egypt. Israel, well, what do you expect? I mean, they're always getting foreign aid from the U.S., and that's something we need to address. Egypt, probably because they're being paid off not to start fighting Israel. The Gaza situation, well, I'm going to be honest, folks. People think I've been anti-Israel and I've been pro-Palestinian, and not exactly, no. I think they both have a lot to answer for. And again, we're dealing with people that don't think like they should. Now, Gaza is a pile of rubble. People are beginning to return to this pile of rubble. Let me tell you this. Anyone with a reasonable level of intelligence who had a piece of territory at the eastern end of the Mediterranean and didn't turn it into a Singapore or a Hong Kong, especially given the billions and billions and billions of dollars being put into it, are just damn fools. They did start this latest round with Israel, to be fair. Israel did really punish an awful lot of people that had nothing to do with it. That happens in war. I am not condoning what they did one little bit. I think they really just want to get rid of Gaza so they can build a new canal. You've heard of that one. They want to build their own version of a canal to compete with the Suez. That's something that's not being talked about too much, and it would go right through Gaza. We'll see how all this goes. But they call it mowing the lawn in that part of the world. Every so often there's a war, a bunch of people get killed, and they go back to, building up their hatred and going at it again. Best stay away from that. I think that we should cut off all aid to Israel and Egypt and sit back and watch. Well, the one country that has been also had its aid cut off, justifiably so, is South Africa. Now, South Africa has been run by communists. It doesn't matter if they're black. They're communists. They're monsters. And they have been slaughtering white people who are just as African as they are, realistically. People say not. They've been there for almost half a millennium. And in spite of how many people thought that apartheid was repulsive, it was nothing compared to the monstrous murders that have been going on in that country now for decades. Horrible things. I knew people from South Africa. I had a friend I found out many years after that he had been killed with the violence that goes down there. Why is that? Well, there's parts of Africa that are actually quite nice, believe it or not. If you want to see how Africa could have gone, read about Jomo Kenyatta, the first president of post-colonial Kenya, and forget about the Obama relation to that country. It's really not relevant overall. They had some pretty wise people back in the day that were on that continent. But the African National Congress, communist filth they are the worst thing to arise on that continent since Ebola. And they're now not going to be funded by the American taxpayer. Good. And if they're going to turn their fury on the white people that are still in that country and continue to murder them in cold blood, which is what they've been doing, Who knows? Maybe there will be some intervention there as well. Even then, some of the leaders have admitted that when they took over the country from white rule back in the day, it was a functioning, basically a first world country. Fortunately, the people running it decided to disable their nuclear arsenal and get rid of it. Leaving nuclear weapons behind for such monsters would have been, well, a little irresponsible. But that's one country that really needs to be changed. Other countries being changed, courtesy of the U.S. military. Somalia, yeah, them again. That's being dealt with. And, this is all what we were expecting, those of us who understood how the world works. The U.S. is now correcting a course that was a pretty nasty one. We're going to probably be rebuilding the military, U.S. industry, financial stuff, energy, all sorts of things are going to be changing, but it's not going to be changing easily. It's not going to be changing peacefully. Now, another thing to look for, if you want to talk about Mexico, and I'll leave you on a couple of things here, but is you've been seeing video of people waving Mexican flags and blocking traffic in various parts of the United States, especially California. They're protesting that they're being rounded up and those that are here illegally being sent back. Oh, really? Throughout history and throughout the world, do you know how long that sort of behavior would be tolerated? People think the U.S. is intolerant? No. They wouldn't be alive in less than an hour in many places in the world I've visited. Believe me, they'd be lucky to be deported. This is what we're going to be facing. People that have come to this country, invaded it, taken over, done crimes here, set up ongoing criminal enterprises. Again, we're not talking about somebody down the street working as a gardener. We're talking about some real serious monsters that have come into this country and, to an extent, control Mexico. Mexico has a great deal of influence exerted on its system of government by the cartels, which have billions and hundreds of billions of dollars they've gotten by way of things like fentanyl and heroin and other nefarious drugs that destroy people's lives. I know that people are still very upset about what happened in the Potomac, but you know what? If you look at the numbers, the death toll of that air crash in the Potomac River this past week is about half of the number of people who die every single day in the United States from fentanyl. Look at the numbers. The cartels did not sign the Geneva Convention. They are run by monsters who arguably do not have souls, and they're going to have to be rooted out and killed. Do not be surprised to see military action done on Mexican territory to go after these people. This is going to be bloody. I predicted that for some time now. You've got to eradicate these people. And I hope at the same time we start eradicating drug use in the United States. It's because of supply and demand that these organizations exist. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The craziness is being attacked. It is not going to die easily. The most rabid of animals always fight to the death. And to show a sign of how totally detached things are, do you remember a guy named David Hogg? The victim, it was being depicted as near a school shooting back in the day. Oh, he's really ridden this one. Mr. Anti-Gun, we've got to get rid of guns. This nothing of a man, if you can call him that, is now vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. Do you believe that? I thought that was a joke. I said, oh, that must be the Babylon Bee or something. It's not. These people are doubling down on the insanity. It's not going to go away easy. It's not going to go away without a struggle. It's not going to go away without pain, but it has to be made to go away. So we do see a civil war going on in the United States. It's not one where people have troops in the streets shooting at each other, and hopefully it won't go that far. But there's going to be a propaganda war, the likes of which you have never seen. So be very careful where you get your information. And if it's too much, turn it off. Because listening and letting any of their lies, no matter where the lies are coming from, get into your head is how they'll get you in the end. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends, and especially these days, share with your enemies. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. This podcast originates at Substack. My address there is aureliancolumn.substack.com, and if you look for me, I'm on most social media platforms. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World and the Deep State must be destroyed. Good day.